Our society as a whole is suffering from the impact of toxic masculinity, and Kyree Oliver is on a mission to help heal that by teaching men to be better men. In this conversation, you'll learn the two types of toxic masculinity, the difference between toxic and healthy masculine energy, the three pillars of masculinity, and why men and women need to work as allies in order to heal as a conscious collective. Kyree Oliver is a successful marketing expert who understands that marketing is really just high-level critical thinking on human behavior and patterns. He's spent years researching and interviewing hundreds of people to gain a deeper understanding on the human psyche. Kyree is now embarking on a new legacy that aims to create better men by helping them ground into their masculinity. Today's episode is sponsored by my advanced digital training, Unleashed and Unapologetic, How to Become a Thought Leader and Build a Cult Following. If you're ready to gain visibility, build a loyal following, and create impact while increasing your income, enroll for the UNU training at www.rubyfremon.com/unleashed. Now it's time to learn the difference between toxic and healthy masculinity with Kyree Oliver. Hey, thought leaders, I am back with one of my favorite, shall we call him a bear? But Kyree and I first connected on Facebook years ago when he tried to pitch me. And since then, we have actually developed quite the friendship. Yes, you did try and pitch me. But we've developed a great friendship. We've both grown and evolved so much in our businesses. And I just love this guy. He's got a great approach to business, to life, and to the masculine and feminine energies, which is what we're going to chat about today. So Kyree, welcome to today's Thought Leader.
Yeah, thank you for having me on.
Super stoked
Excited.
to have you on. I'm excited for you because it feels like you're evolving into this like next level of your entrepreneurial journey in writing a book and launching this whole other side of you for the world to see. Tell us more about what's going on there.
Yeah, it feels interesting because they're so separate. What I've done before and what I'm doing now have nothing to do with one another, at least on the surface.
Yeah.
So I own a marketing consulting company. The only reason I actually got into marketing was to learn how to do it for myself eventually when I jumped into this
Smart.
men's coaching thing. Yeah. And so back when I reached out and tried to pitch you I think that was like 2015, I think like late 2015.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it really was like, okay, I need to get repetitions in. I'm an ex-football player. I know how good repetitions do for you. And so in order to get good at this thing, I just need to have as many interactions as possible. And it accidentally became my full-time job was doing marketing. It's always been a skill set that I've had since I started doing it.
Yeah.
But it's never been that legacy passion project that I'm really, really looking to give to the world. That lies more in the personal development side. Really, my focus right now is just teaching men how to be better men overall, how to show up better. Yeah.
Yeah. Why is that so important to you? Like to teach men how to be better men?
Honestly, I think a big thing of it is I didn't have it modeled for me when I was younger. And so it was like, I remember how difficult it was to piece that thing together. I probably have, I say 15 different men in my life that I can look back and say, they've all helped shape me as a man. But I didn't have that, like most people have the father figure. That's just the one consolidated source of here's how to show up as a man in the world. Here's what it looks like. Here's how to treat your relationships, your money, your job, your everything. And not having that, I remember how difficult it was to go out and find it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think a big draw for me is I want to be able to, for people who don't have the consolidated source or their source isn't the best to be learning from,
right,
to have that source to say, okay, here's my scope of it. Here's my view of this. And, being in my early mid 20s right now, I'm 24, I'm still close enough to that growth process that I'm old enough to take a view back on it, but I'm close enough to it that I still vividly remember. I still vividly remember like I was 6 the first time I told my mom, I was like, I don't think dad loves me very much, or I don't think dad cares about me very much. I still remember literally the day he had missed, I had a worm project in first grade and
Mm-hmm.
he had missed it. And it was like the fifth thing in a row that he had missed, and ended up telling me that that his alarm clock broke. I swear my dad must have gone through a few hundred alarm clocks when I was little, because it was always his alarm clock broke or it
Right.
didn't go off. Realistically, it wasn't important enough. And I didn't realize that until later. Um, so I just remember all of the steps that it took to become what I am right now. And I mean, I'm nowhere near perfect. None of us are, but
Mm-hmm.
I've been able to luckily now kind of articulate my journey and start setting up, let's call them pillars of masculinity that I've seen, of saying, if you have X, Y, and Z put together and you learn how to make them work in equilibrium, that's the optimal place for you to be as a man or just as an adult in the world.
Mm. So does this mean that when you look at the world as it stands today, especially with social media being as big as it is, that you're seeing that the quote unquote balance of masculine energy isn't there? Like, are you seeing this as a collective problem in our society right now?
Yeah. And you can take it from the individual level all the way to the macro, the big scope. And I think, especially in America, looking at the rate of single mothers, I was raised by a single mother. I
Mm,
understand what that looks like. I have even friends now who were only in our, again, early mid 20s. I know a lot of girls my age who are already single mothers.
mm,
I think that there's a difficult thing that men have to go through when the mom has to play the role of the mom and the dad. And
mm-hmm.
it goes nothing against women at all.
Right.
I think boys need a dad.
Mm-hmm.
I'm always a big proponent of that. Again, I don't care to I don't mean to be hurtful at anybody who chooses not to live that nuclear family lifestyle of mom, dad, kids. Um, but for me, I think collectively as a country, that's important. I don't want to judge anybody by their individual interests or how they choose to live at all in any way, shape, or form. But I think collectively, having the masculine energy and that ability to lead in the house, as
Mm.
far as teaching men how to grow up and be men, is so missed right now.
Right. So for males to really have another male counterpart that they can actually look up to, because without having that, um, they're missing out on really learning more about themselves and how they're here to show up and how they're meant to take care of themselves, but really having that presence be someone that has a healthy balance of this
Yeah.
energy. And I know that we're talking about both sex and energy right now. We're talking about men, and
Yes.
we're also talking about masculine energy. Let's make it super clear for our audience what you mean about the masculine energy.
The masculine energy is the leading and the taking control. And I don't mean controlling other people. I mean taking charge. I mean the initiative. That's the grit. That's the grind. I think that's masculine. That's all in your masculine energy. Now, I know typically the women or the female energy is the creative.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a different form of creativity that the masculine brings that, again, is necessary. It's needed. I think it's what's always pushed the world forward.
Mm-hmm.
I think maybe it's, call it innovation, call it whatever you'd like to call it. Um, but there's this essence that I think when we all meet a powerful man, and not by the money that he makes or the business that he has, but a man who can stand in that masculine presence, it's felt.
Right.
Um, it's not something you have to be explained to you. You feel it. You understand it when you're there standing in front of it. And no part of that is toxic. No part of that makes you feel insecure. It makes you feel the most secure you've ever felt in your life.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I
It's the
think that is what we
security.
need.
The
Mm-hmm.
security, right? Because a lot of the masculine energy, when we're talking about energies, the masculine energy is the protective energy. It's
Yeah.
the keeping you safe energy. And so much of what we're experiencing right now as a society, with the rise of the feminine, due to the awareness of the toxic masculinity.
Yep.
So much of that is skewed because of this. Like people are who see the feminine rise, who are complaining about it, don't really understand that this was all coming. This is all in due process because of the toxic masculine energy that we have been dealing with as a society for so many years.
And that's what I tell so many men. It had to happen. It was supposed to happen. It was like ordained by our actions for so long. When the men of, let's say, the 70s, 80s, 90s chose to go out and have multiple families sometimes, or chose to make the wrong decisions and go to prison or jail or get killed, who chose to go outside of, again, who they're supposed to be as men. I think we all just understand who we're supposed to be. Some of us make decisions to take the easy road or the road that seems most alluring at the time. We did this to ourselves. So especially when men get mad at the whole toxic masculinity thing,
right.
said you have nobody else to blame. You got nobody else to blame. The only thing we can do, because again, culture works in a pendulum. The only thing we need to do is be able to backload this thing enough to where that pendulum starts to swing back in the way of men feel comfortable leading again. Men feel comfortable being the security blanket again. I believe that as a culture. Now, the only time I've had, difference of opinion with people is when people try to say that men as individuals are working on a pendulum. I posted a status maybe a week ago now talking about certain, some men in the spiritual community who have abandoned their masculine, I think sometimes for fear of being the toxic. I think they viewed masculinity as a toxic trait. So they chose to drop that masculine. And I remember one woman specifically posted on my status, it was like, oh yeah, it's just a pendulum swing. Men are supposed to be doing that now because they're fighting against the toxic masculine. And I said, no. As a culture, we shift. We swing as a pendulum. As a person, you make a decision today. Don't act like you have to, make a decision or set yourself up for a decision 10 years from now. You can decide today to embody the healthy masculine. You don't have to work on that pendulum swing as society does. Society has to be the collective. That's why it takes a while. You can take 5 minutes and decide right now, I'm going to step into my masculine and be the healthiest version, the most pure version of that I can possibly be. And that's how I'm going to fight against toxic masculine.
Yeah. It's so interesting because as a society, you're right. And we're witnessing this, me as a female, I'm going to witness this in my fellow males. And as the individual male, you need to witness that within yourself. And I have seen this. I've experienced it with men that I've seen online and men that I know who, it's almost like because of the rise of the feminine, they feel scared to show up. They have the fear of showing up or being labeled as a toxic masculine. So they drive too far to the other end. So why don't you break down for us, what does it actually look like to have the toxic masculine energy, and what does it look like to have a healthy masculine energy?
Yeah. So I think there's 2 types of toxic, and this is actually something I'm outlining in the book that I'm writing right now. We view toxic masculine as the raw alpha, quote unquote alpha, because to me, that's the most beta type of man you could possibly be, is somebody who disrespects women or disrespects literally anybody around you. So I kind of reject that being what we call alpha. But that's what we normally see when we think of toxic. We think of powerful businessmen taking advantage of women, taking advantage of just everybody around them. My view is those guys are incredibly toxic, but so are the guys that subvert themselves. And I call these are kind of the snakes in the grass that I think even a lot of women aren't realizing right now. So many men out there pretending to be in their feminine and receive and be so, and unfortunately it's leaked it quite a bit into the spirituality space. Men who pretend to be so higher or evolved, or I've healed my masculine. Some of them it's just an excuse. It's an excuse to get in, I'll say it, some women's panties. And women are falling for it all day long. It's a very good ploy. It's, look, I'm not that rah, super aggressive guy over there, so I must have your best interest in mind. I must be an ally to women because I'm not the rah, masculine. I think what happens is they have somehow subverted themselves now, acted like the I'm harmless. And I think they're right now sometimes attacking women from the inside. You look at the normal toxic is attacking women externally,
Right.
shaming them, putting them down for their life choices, putting them down for their looks, not allowing them certain jobs because they don't feel like women are competent. That's the one that's in our face. But there's an equally toxic version that's going on, and sadly, sometimes kind of eating women from the inside out and showing up as this passive man, this guy who could never hurt me. And I
Right.
think sometimes those are the ones that do the most damage.
Well, it's so interesting. Before we go into the healthy masculine, this is so interesting because I know that there are probably women who are listening to this right now and being like, holy shit, like, I can't believe Ruby's having this conversation. Is she submissive? Like, what's going on? Like, we always have those extremes, right? I believe very strongly in the feminine masculine energy, and I've grown up in a culture that also very much has traditional male and female roles. Now, as someone who has evolved from that culture and someone who lives in 2019, like, I get that I can be whoever the fuck I want to be, and I like to be taken care of by my man. I like my man to open doors for me. I like to feel safe. I like for him to provide that sense of security, and he does so, and he does a phenomenal job at that. And we have this, I don't even know what to call it, like an epidemic, something that is happening in our society where women feel like, in order to feel empowered as a woman, I cannot let the security come from the male, or I cannot let that man have those roles. And it's like, when we look at the male and female, we are built differently. Fact. Scientifically, hormonally, we are built differently, physically, like everything, the chemistry, it's all different. We are wired for different things. And so there have been clients I've worked with who have been in relationships where they're like, Ruby, I'm like really tired of showing up like the man in the relationship and making all the choices. And my question to them is always like, well, are you giving them an opportunity? Are you giving your partner, your male partner, an opportunity to make those choices? Are you giving them an opening to take charge? Or are you constantly taking charge because you're still wearing your masculine energy from your entrepreneurial day job and you're bringing that into your relationship? You know what I mean? And so there's this, like, I know there are going to be females listening to this episode. I can just like feel it percolating in the air right now, who are going to have something to fucking say to me, but I don't give a shit. Like, this is how I feel. This is my opinion. And I believe that the masculine and the feminine energies, and separate from the actual physical sex, the masculine and feminine energies have a role, and that's why they both exist, and that's why they both need to exist simultaneously, both within a human being and in the society. There's my rant. Mic drop. I'm fucking done.
But I think you hit it right there, and that's why it's so important. The fact that some women are going to feel, let's call it, triggered by something like that, is why it's so important to have the conversation and say, okay, if you think this way is wrong, then tell me the right way. Because there's answers to this, and I think there are multiple answers to this, but just complaining about what is not the answer. I think what those women are doing is still choosing one side or the other. They're still saying, I'm going to embody the masculine, therefore men can't. I have to be my own masculine. And I'll say, most of the time that I've seen it, and I see it sometimes in my female clients. I have one that I'm thinking of right now. She's like in her mid 50s, and it's just, I mean, masculine is all hell. Like, she's in it. But, and I know this is obviously a very extreme example. She was raped multiple times when she was a teenager and a young woman. She was also abused by her father and her older brother and an uncle. When you've had that much abuse from masculine energy or masculine men, do you think you ever want to have to rely on a man for protection again? Do you think you ever trust a man to protect you again after experiencing all that? Hell no. I've seen that as a trend for some of the most successful women I've ever met, have had some sort of trauma where the world or somebody around them has told them, masculine is out to hurt you. Masculine cannot belong inside of a man. You have to be your own masculine. It may have been subconscious. Some women don't know that they're living at that space, You've been taught by shitty masculine that men can't be given the responsibility of being masculine anymore. You
Well,
guys lost
they've been
your chance.
taught that men don't provide safety. In fact, they take that away. And
Yep.
and this is, you know, in any woman who has ever experienced any sort of sexual trauma, like this is what happens, is the paradigm shifts, and now all of a sudden the masculine becomes the one who is no longer the protector, but the masculine is the one who in fact takes away that sense of security. I lost you for a second. You back? Hey, you're back. Perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you
So
hear me?
yeah. So the masculine, you know, and it's that new program that is adopted and inserted after a trauma is, okay, now the masculine is no longer my protector. The masculine is the one that takes away the protection, is the one that severs that feeling of security that I have. And this is why, and this is what everyone needs to understand, is that in order to heal the feminine wound, we must simultaneously heal the healthy masculine. Like we need to heal
Yep.
all of it, and we need to get
And
everyone
allow those to
together.
exist together. It's not
Exactly.
either or. Let those
No.
happen at the same time.
Exactly. I mean, there's a reason why I intentionally make my events co-ed, and I intentionally seek out men to come into that space, because it helps women understand, oh, not all men are like this. And look at how safe I can feel around the presence of these men while I'm sharing in a vulnerable way. I mean, that's what was happening at my event this year. And I was so grateful for the men who showed up. And this is what we need to do as a society. So I'm so grateful for you to like bring this to the surface, especially in a time where like this topic can get really fucking fired up, and a lot of
Yep.
people are being triggered left, right, and center by this idea. And I could even assume that a lot of people are going to get triggered by the idea of better men when the book comes out. But it's, in order to heal the feminine, we need to heal the masculine, and vice versa. It all goes together.
And that's the thing, is you've been wounded by wounded masculine. The
Mm-hmm.
women who have gone through those things, those men didn't feel whole. No man who's actually standing in his space as my role is protecting, my
Mm-hmm.
role is security. That guy's not going to hit you. That
Right.
guy's not going to call you a bitch. There's no way in the world. I've told my girlfriend before, and she'll tell anybody, I can get as angry as I ever want. You'll never hear that word come out of my mouth towards you. You'll never see me raise my hand towards you. I mean, you could do the worst thing in the world to me.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing I'll do is walk away. The
Right.
only thing that loses me.
Yeah.
You'll never get a black eye. You'll never, none of that. You'll never have me cuss you out. Because of that, I'm able to now see those men who do that are wounded.
Yeah.
You've taken their wounds, they've kind of pushed it off to you. It's kind of like the kid in school who, like, you could tell his dad was abusive because he was the bully.
Yeah.
Now I think sometimes women have experienced that from men, and they go out and bully men.
Right.
And it's, again, that's not a generalization at all. There's a certain
Right.
smaller version of women who I actually used to rent a room to my friend Emily, and she was one of those women. She used men as toys. Men were her little playthings,
Mm-hmm.
and it was because she'd been wounded by it. She'd been cheated on in a previous relationship. So anytime we'd go out, I would literally. She was funny one night. I watched like her embody that wounded thing where she had to put up that masculine wall to protect herself.
Right.
Well, the masculine outside of me won't protect me. The masculine inside of me needs to protect me.
Right.
I would literally watch her. She would go up to a guy in a bar. She would pull him away from whatever he was doing, his group of guys, and make it a show. I'm taking this guy into my space. She would dance with him for a solid 30 seconds and push him away and go find the next guy.
Right.
And I literally saw what was going on internally from her. She was showing it on the outside. She was doing that. I'm going to bring you in. I'm going to show you that I want you, but I don't need you. And in order to show you that I don't need you, I'm going to physically push you away and go on to the next person. That, I think, is what we're starting to do. We're starting to say, okay, well, you did this to me, so I'm going to do this to you.
Right.
The
Like a
way I try to view it,
retaliation.
exactly. The way I'm trying to view it is I see this being done collectively. Instead of pushing back, I need to stand where I'm at. I need to say, here's who I am. I'm the one protecting. I'm the one securing. And I used to go to events all the time. I missed yours and I wish that I hadn't. But one of the big things that I'm told, usually, especially with events of female friends, when they have me there, there's a sense of you're secure, you're safe. When I look them in the eyes at their event, they can tell I've got their back. They can tell if something happens, if somebody is stupid and tries to run up on stage or something, I'm going to do something about it. I've got your best interest in mind. That's all my masculine. My masculine does that. It fills up a room that I'm in because I stand in it. I don't run away from it, and I don't try to push on anybody else. I am it. And I think that's what we need to do for people is you need to, like, when you feel the tension between the healthy masculine and the toxic masculine outside of you, the best thing you can do is stand on your own 2 feet and say, nope, here's who I am. Here's where I stand. I'm not going to run away from my masculine because that doesn't serve anybody. I'm also not going to jump into the toxic or being the snaky toxic because that doesn't help anything either. I'm going to stand here and show the world, be that beacon of what masculinity is supposed to look like.
Yeah. Take a fucking stand and just
And
represent it.
and the same for women. And that's why I value women like you and a few of the women like who are in my network who I can just tell you're standing there. You're not blaming men for everything. You're not blaming yourself for everything. You're not taking an outside view of everything. You're saying, I'm going to stand here and be what I believe. Like you said, you can be a powerful, badass woman and still want your husband to open up doors for you. And that's okay.
It doesn't make you less than or less of, and it's just I feel like it's such a important topic to bring to the surface now because of all this sense of retaliation, tit for tat. This happened, so now we need to yell at the top of our lungs and express our anger and all of that. It's like, cool, yes, feel your anger, like feel your wounds and give yourself the space to and grace to do that. And let's all find a way to move forward together, because if we get stuck in the anger and we get stuck in the resentment and we get stuck in the tit for tat behavior, then this is never going to shift. And as a conscious collective, in order to move forward, we must move forward together, both energies, both sexes, men and women, all sexes. We all need to take a fucking stand and move forward together. And now is the perfect time to do that because all of this is now coming to the surface. Great. Like all this shit, starting with like the Me Too movement, Harvey Weinstein, like all this shit came to the surface in a very short amount of time, very close together for this very reason. So we can start working through this because, yeah, I mean, otherwise we're just going to be continuing to perpetuate this problem that is impacting us as individuals. It's impacting our society as a whole, and it impacts the world in terms of where the direction in which we're moving in. So we've talked about like the toxic masculine energy. Let's talk more about healthy masculine energy and really get down to how do you describe that? Yeah.
So, and this is the best way I've been able to put it, and it still doesn't do it justice. Again, my best addition to this conversation, or my best input, is being. It's much harder to articulate than to be. Articulating it, the best way I've been able to put it, and I put kind of 3 pillars of masculinity. It's having a soft heart, which is your empathy, thick skin, which is your emotional intelligence, and a hard head, which is not the stubbornness, but it's the grit, determination, stick-to-itiveness. It's that drive of I need to go do and create and lead, and that it's I don't want to call it aggressive. It's the driven energy. And so when you're able to have all 3 of those working in equilibrium, again, your empathy, that's almost 100% feminine. That's your receiving. I'm receiving your information. I'm receiving what you're putting out to me. I'm processing it, and I'm going to show up for you in the way that you need me to, not the way I'd like to. That's empathy. I'm going to put myself literally in your position. And that's a big distinction too, is empathy versus sympathy.
Right.
Sympathy is I feel for you. Empathy is I'm going to adopt and I'm going to feel what you feel so that I understand you better and what I need to do for you. That's almost 100% feminine, because it's, again, there's the receptive. The masculine's giving, the feminine's receptive, like receiving and creating. That's my empathy. And again, you think about the toxic masculine, what are they missing? Empathy is probably the biggest thing that they're missing. So they've disregarded their feminine, just like a lot of the women who've disregarded, or a lot of the men who've disregarded their masculine.
Right.
A lot of men also have disregarded their feminine. That's why, like, I wouldn't say women's role is to be passive, but men who are only in their feminine are incredibly passive. I would definitely call them passive. It's when you're supposed to be in your masculine and you choose to do the receptive instead of the giving, you become a passive man. And I don't think that, again, it doesn't move anything forward. The ideal or healthy masculine is able to embody that empathy muscle, then also go forward and say, I'm going to have, again, the thick skin, the emotional intelligence. Something comes in, somebody says something to me. Do I need to hit them? Or sometimes do I just need to walk away? Or do I need to spit some intelligence to them or spit some knowledge to them and say, I understand why you said that to me.
Right.
Here's why it's not okay. Here's why I'm not the person to say something like that to. Here's why, whatever. Sometimes they need to articulate it. I believe sometimes there is a cause to be violent when there's danger, or when you have to protect somebody around you. You have to protect somebody's honor. You have to protect somebody's physical well-being. But most of the time, your emotional intelligence will allow you to go right up to the point to where you can solve the problem and not go anywhere past. And I think that's something a lot of people have a difficult time with, is addressing the problem immediately and directly, but not overstepping and not doing too much or not causing irreversible damage to the situation. Right. To be able to regulate and say, what is needed from me in this space? And again, part of it's empathy. Part of your emotional intelligence goes back to, how does this person need me to best show up for them? Even if they're trying to hurt me in some way. If somebody says something crazy to me online, do I need to talk shit back to them?
Right.
And just bring myself and play their game where they feel comfortable, they feel safe saying something like that to me? Or do I correct them? Do I ignore them? But ask yourself the questions before you just react. The hard head, that grit, that stick-to-itiveness, that stubbornness sometimes, that's what allows you to stick through things that aren't comfortable. I'm going to keep going even though I don't want to. I'm going to go to the gym this morning even though it doesn't feel good, because my emotional intelligence tells me what's on the back end of that hard work. I'm going to go to work today. I'm going to get on these client calls. I'm going to sit down and listen to my wife talk about her day for 45 minutes, even though I want to go watch football, because my emotional intelligence tells me that the payoff for making my wife feel understood is much more valuable to me than the hour that I can go watch the football game when I can go watch it later or go watch the highlights tonight. That emotional intelligence is going to allow the stick-to-itiveness to happen in the right way, where you go from stubborn and sometimes bullheaded to now it's just powerfully moving throughout life. But I think, again, they all need to inform one another. The empathy informs the emotional intelligence. The emotional intelligence informs how you have the hard head. They all kind of work together. And I think the hard head and the empathy work together as well. I think it all, again, create equilibrium between the three of those pillars. And that's, I think, how you stand the most powerfully and how you move, move through the world as a man, woman, just person in general. But obviously my message is towards, I think men need to be better overall.
Right. I love how you describe that, the soft heart, the thick skin, and the hard head, because all three of these things could be seen as negative traits, right? You have too soft of a heart, your skin is too thick, you've got too hard of a head, you're bullheaded. And yet the way in which you described it is really finding that equilibrium between the three and letting the three play into each other so that you can really stand tall and stand grounded in your presence as a masculine. So it's really cool that you played with the words in that way. I love that. Yeah.
And I go through in my book each combination. What happens when you have thick skin, a hard head, but no empathy?
Right.
Sometimes you turn into that shark. You turn into that guy who's willing to do anything to get to where you want to go because you understand the end result, which is your emotional intelligence, but you don't give a shit about other people. You can't put yourself in your employee's shoes to know that they need a raise or they need to be told that they're valued.
Yeah.
When you have, you know, a lot of times when you have the soft heart, but no thick skin and no hard head, you turn into that passive guy. You just let life happen.
Right.
So I start kind of going through the combinations of them, not only like when they work well together, but what happens when you have too much or too little of one of those elements, how it tips the entire scale.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to kind of figure out archetypes of guys so that guys can start kind of diagnosing, where do I need more? Where do I need less? Those super raw guys, come back on the hard head a little bit.
Right.
Take that, what you just took from the hard head, go put that in your empathy bucket. Like you can be like teaching preschoolers. We're gonna have 3 buckets, and we're gonna try to have them all at a nice even level each.
Yeah.
Let's go out and try to figure that out. If you have too much over here in this bucket, hey, that bucket that's lacking a little bit needs some more. Sometimes you need to learn some emotional intelligence. You need to learn how to let some things go. Maybe things hit you too close to the heart. I know a lot of my friends who would consider themselves empaths are like that. I have to teach a lot of my empathetic friends because I'm naturally very empathetic. I would consider myself an empath. I feel other people's emotions when they're around me or when they talk to me. But I also set up that filtering system to say, okay, how much of this is powerful? How much of this is teaching? And then how much of this turns into sympathy, where I just feel bad for you now.
Right.
And I stop it right before it turns into sympathy. And I say, here's how I can powerfully help you. Here's how I can effectively do better for you. That's the emotional intelligence side.
Yeah, that's so good. Because I mean, all of this, the 3 pillars of masculinity, they're skewed because these men just haven't had the right teachers, the right male presence in their lives to be able to teach them this. And so the overcompensation, I feel, comes from a place of like their own wounds, you know, maybe whatever they experienced, were they bullied, were they traumatized as men, what are they going through, what are their experiences? And so they throw these things off of balance as a protective mechanism, right? Like, oh, I need to have a really, really thick skin because as a male, I can't show my feelings. You know, like the traditional look, like men don't have feelings. We're not supposed to show feelings because then we can't be the protectors. But, you know, the way in which you're describing it, it's really just, I see it as like dials. So like each of these different pillars has a dial, and basically now men get to play with those dials until they find like a good setting that works powerfully for them so they can show up in their most empowered state and also have a really beautiful impact on the people around them, right? Because our presence is powerful and our presence has a massive impact on the people around us, whether it's positive or negative.
Yeah. And it also allows you to kind of it allows you to skew the 3 dials as you see fit. Again, some people don't have the nuclear, you know, mom, dad, and kids, and dad being the leader of the house. Sometimes there are women, and I realize it in a lot of powerful women, who want a more submissive man. Cool. Have them turn that empathy up to 5 million and turn down the hard head a little bit. If you don't want to heal and step more into your feminine, if you're consciously choosing that you are a woman and you want to stay in that masculine, I don't have a problem with it. Make sure you have a guy who's receptive to it. Like my remedy for that, go find a guy who's more manly than you are. Actually, I told that client that. She's in her mid 50s and she's like, I just don't know, what do I do with these guys? She was real big on, she would find guys, she's a white lady, she loved big black men. And because I realized they look powerful to the outside world, they look like her protector. Behind closed doors, they were children to her. They were somebody for her to take care of. They were big guys who she had to baby. And she had asked me one day, she didn't break down, but like we had a conversation. She said, I don't know how to get out of this thing. I don't feel like I can be a woman around my man. How do I fix it? I said, go find a man who's more manly than you are. And luckily she knows me well enough to know that I wasn't trying to disrespect her. But have his masculine outweigh your masculine, and you'll see just how quickly your female is allowed to, or your feminine is allowed to breathe. Because that's, I think, what happens a lot of times when women embody that masculine, you start suffocating your feminine energy. You don't know how to receive love anymore. You don't know how to receive protection anymore because you've taught yourself out of it.
Yep.
What you need to go do is find a man who's, again, embodying that healthy masculine. There's no woman in the world who's able to be around me and close to me and start headbutting with my masculine, because I have more than her. I win. I'm an ex-Division I athlete. I can take people's faces off for a living. I got my college paid for by literally being like aggressive and violent on the football field. You're not going to outdo my testosterone.
Yeah.
So what that does to you is, at first it challenges you because your masculine wants to fight with my masculine. You want to compete. As soon as I show that I'm able to be calm masculine, because a lot of times what happens when women embody too much of the masculine, it becomes that aggressive masculine. Your aggressive masculine is going to look like a crazy person next to my very calm, because it's who I naturally am. Your masculine is a shield to cover your, or not to cover your emotions, but to protect your emotions, protect yourself. If yours is just a cover and mine is an embodiment of who I really am, there's no way that yours is going to outlast mine.
Right.
So I've even had friends and women who come at me with that combative thing. Every single time they some of them end up becoming some of my closest friends, because they realize that if they just allow, their feminine can breathe. And I think some of them, you can see when it happens. You can see when all of a sudden they realize, oh, Kyree's not trying to be an asshole to me. He actually has my best interest. Again, he actually wants what's best for me. Maybe I can allow this thing to breathe a little bit. And as soon as it happens, you start seeing the realization, oh shit, I can be a little bit more feminine. I can allow this thing to happen. I can, again, allow be receptive to certain things. I don't have to push and be, aggressive all the time.
Right. And let's be super fucking clear for our audience. Allowance, like allowing, is not in any way, shape, or form, does not mean that you are subjecting yourself to being dominated over. And I think this is also like one of the most common misconceptions, and receiving, like, none of that means that you're being dominated over. And that's why we have this sort of alpha versus alpha energy. I was on in a session with one of my clients, and she's a single mother and she has 3 kids. And this woman, like, fucking hustles. She's an amazing mom. She's super committed to her personal growth and super committed to her kids. And we were talking about her son and how he's entering his teenage years, and he's really acting out and really like starting to disconnect from her, and has said things like, I wish I really had a man to talk to. And she said, I'm trying to be all these things. And I looked at her, we were on a video call, and I said, but you can't be all these things. And the best thing that you could do for your son right now is be a mom and really embody and fully embrace what a mother is there to do. Because the father role isn't yours. And the more you try and push that on yourself, the more you're actually probably going to repel him and feel less and less like you.
And your son feels it subconsciously.
Totally. And she
Your
had
masculine,
this like,
ooh, that's good.
She had this like deep sigh of relief and started crying. And she was like, thank you. And I said, you don't need this permission, but like, let yourself just be a mom and understand that your son can find other male presence, or you can help find that for him through mentors or through peers or through something. But you don't have to be that. You don't have to carry that weight anymore, because that's not yours to carry. You get to focus on all your glorious mothering energy and provide that for your son, because that is what your son needs from you.
Yeah. And I think, so I just had a thought, and I think this may hit for some people, and I really hope it does. Sometimes especially for single moms, when you show up too much in your masculine to your children, your masculine turns into their stepdad. That's probably one of the worst things you can do to your son, is have mom show up as stepdad. That's why your son doesn't like you. Your son sees you as an enemy now. I remember when my mom first I made my mom and my stepdad break up 4 times between when I was 10 until they got married when I was 14. They broke up 4 times simply because of me. I was a complete asshole. I treated him like a stepdad. He was too much of an authority figure. I didn't want it. I didn't need it. In my head at the time, I already had my dad. And I realized, not at that time, my dad was still my hero in some ways, even though I knew, again, he didn't care as much for me as he should have. I still wanted him to be that so much that I made him that in my own head. I think a lot of single moms kind of turn into that sometimes completely on accident. Your masculine to your son turns into stepdad. Mom almost turns into stepdad sometimes, where I don't want to be around mom. I don't want to talk to mom. I don't want to listen to mom, especially coming into your teenage years, because you're finding your own masculine. You don't need to compete with another masculine at home, unless it's like your brother, because then you're obviously on an even level.
Right.
But I think when we act outside of our natural, who we're built to be, like you said, it, of course, is going to cause problems.
Mm-hmm.
Your role, I think, at that point is to find the man that you want your son to be most like. Not necessarily, maybe you don't have to date him, maybe you don't have to marry that man, but make sure that man is in your son's life.
Mm-hmm.
For whatever reason, dad didn't work out. The
Mm-hmm.
man you chose to have your child with, or sometimes didn't choose to have your child with, but had him anyway, that man messed up. That guy didn't do enough. Your job now is to go find the guy who will. And again, not necessarily the guy you marry, but have that male role model in your kid's life that can show him, here's what it means to be this. Here's how to show up powerfully. Here's how to treat your finances, your wife, your kids, your peers. Here's how to do it. And just to show them. And I hope that eventually, maybe if it's even just online or just some of my content or something, that some women can point their kids and say, here's what that looks like.
Right.
Here's what it means. This guy, watch how he moves. Watch how he talks about his girlfriend online, how he talks about his peer group online, how he talks about the people who are important to him online. Look at what he holds dear. And I just, again, hope to be that beacon for people to say, look at that, and that's how you do it.
Right. Which is why I am so excited for this book to come out, Better Men, which is coming out in April. And for our audience, one thing that I can say with full certainty is, because there's a lot of books out there right now about masculinity, but what stands out about this one is, one, I know you, so I'm a great person to say this, but Kyree is 1,000% congruent with what he's saying and who he's being. Anyone can look him up online and see how he shows up and see how he responds to people and see how he responds to his critics and his trolls. And you will feel that healthy masculine presence from him. And so this is a book that is much needed in a time when we need it the most. And I'm just so grateful that you've chosen to take this mission on and make it your own. I cannot wait for the book to come out. Why don't you tell our listeners where they can find or get on the list for the book?
Yeah. So it won't be out until next month. I haven't said the release date yet, but
Right.
It's sometime mid to late April. Right now, the waiting list is at www.bettermenbook.com/waiting list.
Okay, cool. I'm going to have that in the show notes for everyone. So get on the wait list for that. Kyree, we are at the end of our episode. Thank you so much for this conversation. I feel like I could have talked forever about this. Such an important topic. Why don't you tell our listeners how they can connect with you online?
Yeah. Honestly, the best way is just probably my personal Facebook right now. It's facebook.com/Kyree Oliver 1994, I believe.
Okay, cool.
That's like the URL for it. Okay. But, and especially if you're going to add me as a friend, send me a message as well. I get too many friend requests that if I don't recognize you, I won't. But if I know you've heard me on a podcast or something and you've kind of connected with me for a purpose, I'll make sure that, you get accepted and we get to kind of connect on some way.
Awesome. Kyree, thank you so much for joining me on this episode of Today's Thought Leader. I appreciate you. I'm super stoked for your book and just so grateful that we got to have this conversation today.
No, thank you again.
Yeah. And to our listeners, thanks so much for joining us on this episode of Today's Thought Leader, where I'm challenging you to rise up, speak up, and create a movement. If you're ready to gain visibility, build a loyal following, and create impact while increasing your income, enroll for my advanced digital training, rubyfremon.com/unleashed. And if you're ready to get a radical dose of healthy masculinity, go get on the wait list for Kyree's book. Again, the links are in the show notes. Be sure to drop a rating and review on iTunes. And if you have any questions about today's episode for myself or for Kyree, please reach out to us on social media. Those links will also be in the show notes.
Love
Thanks
it.
again, Kyree. And I will see all of you thought leaders back here next week, actually this Thursday, for a brand new episode of Today's Thought Leader.